Hello learners, today we are going to study about the organization in the communities. Our main objective, our learning objective, is to learn about the strategies adopted by the living organisms to share and utilize the available resources, realize the importance of the concept of interconnectivity, and to develop a holistic perspective of nature. Now, how do these communities interact with each other represents the strategies employed by the different species for their food and survival, and this forms the basis of the community organization. So what does community organization mean? Community organization refers to the arrangement and the functional relationship of various strata of life. Such an arrangement enables one to distinguish one ecosystem from another, such as a forest ecosystem or a grassland ecosystem and a tundra. In order to understand the community organization, it is necessary to know two aspects: resource partitioning and stratification. A community consists of a population of different species of plants and animals. They share and coexist in a common habitat and utilize the available resources through partitioning among themselves. But these resources which are available, they are limited, and the organisms have to develop strategies to ensure an effective partitioning among themselves during their geological time scale. So each species has an idea of which resources are to be utilized, at what time they should be utilized, and from where it should be utilized. So what do you mean by the term resource? A resource is a substance or an object required by an organism for its maintenance, growth, and reproduction. So this resource may be renewable or non-renewable. Now the renewable resources include water, food, which can be regenerated continuously, while the non-renewable resources include coal. When once utilized, it can not be replenished. So, what kind of resources are to be harnessed? The organisms, they are categorized as herbivores or carnivores according to the food they consume, as we have already discussed in the previous units about the herbivores, the carnivores, and what kind of food they eat. So some of these animals, they feed on the green plants, and some they feed on the animal species also. But among these herbivores, there are the herbivores, they are selective grazers also, and they feed on a particular grass or a shrub of their own liking. Even the insects and the birds also, they are selective feeders on different parts of the plant, like some they feed on the fruit, some they feed on the leaf, and so on. So the organisms have also developed specialized body parts also to reach for their source of food, how to get their source of food, how to reach for these food which are in their environment or in their surrounding. For example, in a forest, according to the type of food the birds consume, such as seeds, whether they consume seeds or whether they consume grains or whether they consume or the carrion eaters, the birds have evolved, and the beaks are also different in such birds. The carrion eaters have a different kind of beak. The grain eaters have a different kind of beak. So the grain eaters, they have a thin beak, while the carrion eaters, that is the flesh eaters, they have long curved beaks to tear the flesh apart. And their claws have also become modified for the purpose of tearing and holding the flesh of their prey. So the birds have also evolved according, or they have adjusted according to where or the type of food they consume. The seed-eating birds, they also specialize in their choice of food, and they share different seed resources in a community, and hence they try to avoid competition among themselves. So all these organisms, they also have specific sites in their habitat to harvest their resources. In a forest, different bird species, they occupy or live at different heights. If you observe a tree in a forest, you will find that there are different species of birds which are occupying at different levels or at different heights. Some of the birds, they nest and forage at higher branches, some at the middle level, and some near the ground, and some at the forest level. So you will find different species, bird species at different levels of a tree. They may be scattered one above the other, or they forage at different levels. Now, a classical example of a resource partitioning is seen in the small colorful birds known as the warblers in North America, whose different species coexist in the same forests. All the different species, they feed on the insects living in a spruce tree, foraging at different zones of the tree, having its own marked area varying in height. So this is a classic example. This is a classic example of different species of the warblers. So you can see in this picture, there are 5 species of warblers which feed on the insects of the same tree, but they forage at different heights or at different angles. So this example is one of the famous example which of resource partitioning of the warblers in North America, and this suggests that the warblers' niche is defined by the differences in the structural habitat. The resources are partitioned among the plants. For example, you have the annual species. Annual species, they have a short lifespan to complete their life cycle, and they derive their nutrients and moisture from the same soil. So these species, they have different root structures occupying different depths to avoid competition among the interspecific species. This is another example, a classic example of resource partitioning in birds which inhabit the Howrah Bridge. A variety of birds, they build their nest and make it their habitat at the nodal joints of the Howrah Bridge. They feed on the food grains from their neighboring or the nearby granary, and also from the vendors and the hawkers that use the pavement bridge. So this is their source of food. These birds feed on the food grains which they get from the nearby granary and also from the vendors and the hawkers. Now, different species of birds make their nest at different heights, with the pigeon at the lowest level of about 10 meters, crows in the middle, and the kites at the highest level of about 90 meters. And these species, they also know when to harness the resources and utilize and partition the resources also. For example, you have the flowers of different species. Some of the flowers bloom at night, some of the flowers bloom during the daytime. So the flowers of different species, they bloom at different times of the day and at night in order to attract their specific pollinators. The various kinds of insects are the food for birds and bats also. Some of the insect species, they are active during the day while the others are active at night, and this reduces the competition for the food source. Then we have the migratory and the seasonal birds also, which are replaced by others according to the season. According to the season, the migratory birds come and thus reduce the competition for their source of food. One of the famous example is the Serengeti National Park, which is an example of resource sharing on the basis of differential timings. The wild animals in the Serengeti ecosystem, they adjust well to the available resources. Whatever resources is available in that particular ecosystem, they try to adjust. And the animals which dominate or which constitute this ecosystem include the zebras and the antelopes, which are the major population of the grazing animals. These grazing animals, they feed on the herbs, the shrubs and different grasses. But some of the antelopes, they feed on the same plant species. These species, although they feed on the same plant species, but at different stages of plant growth. So the antelopes which feed on the same plant species, they feed on the same plant at different stages of the plant growth. Such a strategy enables the grazing or the browsing animals to feed on the same resource at different times, thus enabling the multi-species community to be stable and sustainable. Now we come to the stratification. It is the arrangement in the strata or the layers. In a community, it tells you how life forms are arranged in a vertical order. Stratification of a community is determined by the life forms of the plants, their sizes, the pattern of branching and the leaves. Light plays a crucial factor in the vertical stratification of a plant community. It provides a physical structure or framework for accommodating different animal species. The communities, they exhibit different stratification patterns. For example, a well-developed forest ecosystem may have about 7 to 8 strata which are differentiated into canopy, understory, shrubs, herbs or ground layer, forest floor, root layer and soil strata. The vines, the epiphytes and the parasites, they represent our different strata. So the forest ecosystem, they are differentiated into these strata. Now the canopy captures the solar energy because it is at the highest level, and this layer is the one which influences the structure and the life of the rest of the forest. So you see there are different layers. You have the canopy, the understory, which is the next layer. Then you find the shrubs. Then you find the herbs which are growing over the ground. Then you have the forest floor. Then you have the root layer and then the soil strata. And then the vines, the epiphytes and the parasites, they grow along these strata. So, in an open canopy forest, since there is sufficient light and light penetrates up to the forest floor, the herbs and the shrubs, they are well developed. Whereas in a closed canopy, since light cannot penetrate up to the forest floor, the understory trees, the herbs and the shrubs, they are poorly developed. The soil moisture also influences the stratification, particularly the herb layer. Other factors include the slope and the density. The forest layer occupies the lowest layer where there is decomposition of the fallen leaves or the forest litter, and then these litter, when they are decomposed, nutrients are released by the action of the microorganisms, and these nutrients are helpful for the cycling of the nutrients. A forest floor having a well-developed strata generates a large amount of litter, making the forest floor an active stratum. The degree of vertical stratum has a profound influence on the diversity of animal life in the community. There exists a strong correlation between the foliage height diversity and the bird species diversity. Places with increased vertical stratification have increased availability of resources and living spaces, which favors a certain degree of specialization. The grasslands with 2 strata, they hold about 6 to 7 species of birds, while a well-stratified forest may occupy about 35 or more species of birds at different strata according to their specialization. When you observe the aquatic system also in lakes and oceans, these aquatic systems, they also exhibit stratification, and the stratification is determined by the light, temperature and oxygen regime. So in this diagram, you can see the stratification of a lake. In this lake ecosystem, the stratification is divided into the following layers: the epilimnion zone, the metalimnion, the hypolimnion and the bottom mud. So what is this epilimnion layer and what does it consist of? So this epilimnion layer, in this layer you get sufficient light, and so it is considered as the chief site of photosynthesis and are mostly dominated by the plants. This zone or this layer consists of a free circulating surface water with sufficient amount of light, and hence it is the chief site of photosynthesis, or it is considered as the chief site of photosynthesis. The second layer, that is the metalimnion layer, is characterized by the thermocline, a steep and rapid decline in temperature. So there is a temperature difference between these layers or these strata in the aquatic ecosystem or in the lake ecosystem also. In the metalimnion layer, you will find there is a steep and a rapid decline in temperature. The species adapted to low light decomposition is found in this zone. So only plants or species which are adapted to low light or temperature can survive in this zone. Then the third layer you have is the hypolimnion layer. The hypolimnion layer, which is a layer where there is low amount of dissolved oxygen, and it's a deep, cold and dense layer. The hypolimnion layer consists or has low amount of dissolved oxygen. The last layer is the bottom layer or the bottom mud layer. So there exists a stratification, both community stratification occurs both in the terrestrial as well as in the aquatic ecosystem, as you have seen in the forest ecosystem and in the aquatic ecosystem, the different stratification of the layers. And in both of these ecosystem, there exists or it consists of an autotrophic layer where light is available in plenty. A heterotrophic layer also exists, as we just saw, which obtain their food from the autotrophs and then transfer the energy and circulates matter by means of herbivory, predation and decomposition. So by studying this unit, we have to think and ponder, and we have to question ourselves whether we have understood what do you mean by resource partitioning, what is the ecological significance of resource partitioning, and if you try to arrange these the stratification in an increasing order, the desert ecosystem, the tropical rainforest, the tundra and the grasslands. And what is the common factor which influences the stratification pattern of a terrestrial, aquatic and a forest ecosystem? And how is stratification related to diversity? Thank you.